So it's really great to see you all. I know it's been a very long time. I think thanks are obviously due to Stuart for organising all of this and getting the agenda pulled together. And it promises to be a very interesting morning of presentations. There's been a lot of new developments from colleagues. If we can save any questions until after the presentations are finished, that'll probably make life a little bit easier for Stuart to sort of tick through them and keep us on track. So are there any initial questions before everything starts?
Will we have a comfort break after the presentation before the discussion?
Oh, I think we can manage that. Can we manage that, Stuart?
I'm sure we can.
Marvellous.
And you'll know where the fire exits are.
Excellent. Right. Well, in which case, without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Chris and Stuart, and we'll see how the Greater London HER has been getting on in their development of the Keystone project, as I believe it's going to be called. Okay, take it away, boys.
Hi, everyone. So, yeah, I'm Chris Dolby. I'm the project manager for our Archer projects at Historic England, and obviously working with Stuart and Phil, Matt. So Historic England, I guess, probably the best way to describe it. We've got quite a strong investment in arches at the moment. We've got a development team who are working on a number of different systems that we're producing. So initially, to kind of get us off the ground and to save ourselves from a system that was in disrepair, we constructed a system called Warden, which we use to now create new records to share out to HERs. But also it was kind of just to make sure that we had somewhere to keep all the data safe prior to actually disseminating it all to the HERs as well. So that project was kind of our biggest learning experience, I think, for working with arches. Andy Jones, who's the development team lead, along with Chantel, who I believe has joined us this morning. The team has had a couple of years of working with arches in several different ways, creating new functionality at this point now as well, and improving accessibility. So the Warden is mainly used, I guess, by our archaeological investigation team in HE and helps us keep our work on course. Then we kind of had some supporting functionality and a bit of reporting software as well. Alongside that, we obviously have been working with the Getty on Arches HER, and Stuart will go into more of that in a few minutes as well, just to kind of give you a bit more detail. Alongside that, we're also now in the earlier days of developing our National Marine Record alongside our Marine Services colleagues. Phil and I have been working on how best to create a marine system from where there was none before. So it was kind of part of our old EAME system. It's kind of an opportunity to think about what we want to deliver from a marine system. Is it a system for inventory? Is it a system that also includes some planning aspects? Is it a system that eventually powers, you know, things like virtual dive trails, all that kind of stuff? So there's been quite a bit of broad discussion along with our other partners as well throughout the organisation. So I think probably at this point I might hand over to Stuart.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Right, if I try and share my screen. Here we go. Can people see that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Try and make that a bit bigger. Yes, hello everybody. Yes, we were hoping to have launched this last year. However, the pandemic really knocked us for six with the lockdown last year, so it's taken us a bit of a while to get back on track. Keystone is the internal name for the project, but we're trying to develop a system that is usable for all our HERs, historic environment records, so therefore Arches for HERs. This is for managing information about the historic environment, but also about managing the historic environment. So we've worked on creating a lot of resource models with the side of looking at the managing the side of the historic environment for our advisors, our colleagues, our advisory colleagues. What we have done is trying to create some resource models to help them with their workflows. Currently at the moment, the planning applications are all over the place. Information is scattered all around on different advisors. What we're trying to do is bring everything together and develop something a bit like a Windows file system. So you'll have your application area and then the various applications, the consultations that might be within that area flowing down through. So all the information about the consultations, any site visits, correspondence is all hung together. So anybody coming along, other advisors who want to find out information about this can find it nice and easily. And they have their own little page for them to actually view their information about the application areas. They can also keep tabs on deadlines through this system as well, and with the correspondence they can also generate template letters. This is based on the different types of application and the types of conditions they may want to place on this. Now, with the general HER side of things, the looking after the information, we currently use a model event source monument. So event will be historical activity, investigation, monument will be site, find, and the source is the information about these two that we have, where have we found this information. Based on our experience of working with HERs and also the work we've done internally with historic environment, we tried to split things up a bit. Events are quite simple, the activities are relatively straightforward to develop. However, the monuments and the sources, we tried to split those out further because the current system was quite restrictive as to how we could record things. All the way through this, we're trying to future-proof the system to make sure that we don't have to refine the system too much in the future. There are other resource models here that I could talk about. This is just showing you what I've been talking about, but I don't really have a lot of time to discuss them now. I'll happily discuss them later or offline. The other major thing that we've been working on with our developers, Farallon Geographics, is spatial mapping. Now, we all know that you can quite easily create lines, points and polygons in arches, but not very detailed spatial recording. You can drop GeoJSON files in, but that's not always convenient. Also, we use a heck of a lot of different types of layers of information that we may not necessarily want into arches because it clogs it up, or other people to see them. So we've got Farallon to develop a link, a GIS link to arches. So if we look at the top banner here, we have a little toggle here which brings up another set of information buttons, and we can click on the arches connector button here. We can log into our server, and then based on our user credentials, it can restrict what we can actually do with that information. There we also have another Chrome pane button here, which will then pull up arches. And so what we can do here is that we can create our information, spatial information in the GIS, and then push that through to arches, which will then generate a blank record for us to populate. Or we can do it the other way around. We can create our texture information in arches and then go into the GIS and create our detailed spatial mapping that way. Currently at the moment, it's only for ArcGIS Pro. We would like to see this for QGIS, because obviously that's open source and fits in with the ethos of arches. It is, from what I understand, simpler and quicker to do. However, we're an Esri organisation, so that's the route that we've gone down. But hopefully in the future we can develop that for QGIS. Talking about the future, some other things that we'd like to do. You may realise that if you're looking through a lot of information on arches on a record through the cards, you can get repetitive strain injury scrolling through. We'd like to try and make this more horizontal. The Arches site in Malaga, they've started to do that a bit, and so we'd like to do something similar. We'd like to make more use of the Arches collector. This is for not just for our advisor colleagues when they go out on site visits, but also for volunteers, crowdsource projects to get people to go out and record information. The last thing that we're looking to do is with 5.1. There's included the Cabana dashboard. We want to make more use of that for helping the advisors record their information, but also for recording stats about our own information for the historic environment records. We have to do a number of surveys for ALGO, the Association of London, the Association of Local Government Archaeological Officers, but also for Historic England. We want to set up some templates for recording information that we need for these surveys. And so that was a very quick whistle-stop tour. I shall stop sharing now. Hopefully that wasn't too much of a gallop, but hopefully I'll take some questions for people afterwards.
Okay, that was really good, and I'm sorry I've not been quite as up to speed recently on what you've been getting up to, Stuart, as I could wish. That's looking really rather nice. Certainly a lot of user interface improvements over where I saw it last. So so thanks very much for that. Okay, so moving on. The next presentation is from Jude from the Isle of Man HER. This is another HER instance of Archers that's actually gone live for public use. So joining ourselves in Lincoln and colleagues over at Jersey in implementing this system. So Jude, if you'd like to take it away, please do.
Can you hear us okay? Can you hear us okay? Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm getting nods. Good. Sorry we joined you a bit late. We were juggling Teams and Zoom and you know what it's like. Anyway, we're here. Good. Nice to see everyone. Do people know Andy? Introducing Andy.
Possibly not. I've been to an HER forum meeting about a year and a half ago, but my name is Andy Johnson. I'm the Inspector of Ancient Monuments for Manx National Heritage, and I actually started here a very long time ago building a sites and monuments record, which was well and truly steam driven, and really what we're doing now is dragging that into the 21st century, very much down to Jude's expertise. So
Always set me up for a fall now.
No.
Well, I'll tell you what. Let's move on to Jersey, because at the very least that will
Yes,
test the system.
Yes, please do.
But
I really enjoy it.
Well, let me roll back from my introduction of Jude, which you can save for later, and I'll just sort of introduce Roger from Jersey HER. This has been a project also and a couple of years in the making. I remember having some early conversations with Peter Chown, who coincidentally lives in Lincoln, which is where I work. So we had some very early discussions about the feasibility of it, and Peter and Roger and David sort of ran with it and have produced this really rather nice Archers HER system, which they're going to talk to you about now. So over to you, Roger.
Great, thank you. I'll try and share my screen as well. See if that works.
It'll work beautifully for you, Roger. I'm sure.
Can everyone see this?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, you see, it's us.
There we go. I mean, I thought I'd just basically go through, sort of run through where we are with the project. I mean, it still feels like early days, but we've actually been live for a year now. So this is our opening page. We obviously use Arches as the HER over here. I'm pleased to see Peter Chown and David Osborne both here, because I'm not the best on the sort of IT literacy. So if there's any complicated questions later on, they can pick those up. So the Jersey Arches was launched in May last year. We're using at the moment version 4.4.2. Version 5 was released a little bit too late in the life of our 3-year project. to deal with that. It's the first HR in Jersey. We haven't got a tradition of a account archaeologist or a sites and monuments record or anything like that over here. We're a bit behind the times. The arch has been set up by Jersey Heritage. Now, we're not part of the government. We are independent, part publicly funded body that provides the heritage services and advice to the government. We did hold discussions for many years with the Jersey government about setting up an HER, but never really got anywhere due to various financial restrictions and the lack of flexibility with their IT department. So we thought, well, let's just do it ourselves, took the plunge and financed it ourselves. So the main drivers at that time was that it was a review of our historic environment advice and historic buildings management in 2016, which was actually put together by Peter. And one of the principal recommendations in that was the need for an HER. In addition to that, we just completed a rather large island-wide listing resurvey, and I think I saw Aylin on screen before. Her team was heavily involved in doing that. We're also aware we have a huge amount of information about archaeology, archaeological finds and historic buildings held by various bodies and individuals in the island. Access is varied. Sometimes the whole thing's unavailable, but certainly never been fully collated. There's also been a real growth in archaeological research and investigations here in Jersey, especially in the last 10 years. There's various ongoing investigations with various academic bodies. The need for archaeology became part of the planning process in 2008, again slightly late for other people. And there's also the ongoing accidental discoveries by the public. And the PAS scheme doesn't extend down to the Channel Islands, and so we wanted to try and cover that area as well. So our primary objective was to make this historic environment more accessible through a web-based platform and also free to use. So with the advice of Peter and David, the decision was made to evaluate arches. I guess similar to everybody else, I mean, we were impressed by the fact that it's specifically designed for the cultural heritage field, especially that it's economical with no licensing fees, that it's open source, configurable, and obviously based on international standards. So we had a wide remit, as you can see here. We're obviously very interested in having a Port of Antiquity recording module, and we're also interested in looking at areas of geological interest, particularly in the future, because Jersey has ambitions as a geopark. So the project, as I say, was guided by David and Peter along the way. We designed a relational database to QGIS layers to record all the information. Then over numerous meetings over the 3-year period, we gradually modified the platform to do what we wanted it to do. Obviously, meeting the international standards of recording, and we found we needed to add a Jersey-specific list. There were certain terms that we used commonly here which didn't appear anywhere, such as dolmen and anything relating to the German occupation during the Second World War. We had a dedicated HR officer employed back in 2017 who did most of the gathering and inputting of data. And then, as I say, we migrated this onto Arches for our online launch in 2020. Very well received initially, and as I say, now unbelievably running for a year. As with everyone else, the launch was a lot more low-key than we'd planned because of the whole lockdown situation, but it was, as I say, very well received. We've had staffing issues. Unfortunately, we lost our dedicated HER officer, which wasn't particularly helpful. But we should have a new person in post early next year. So the initial feedback we've had from people, everyone thinks it's a great resource, a great benefit to researchers. Not everyone's found it easy to navigate the site. I mean, one popular and helpful feature that we put in was the video guides on how to use the arches. Simple things like how to search, how to access reports, use the mapping, and so on. and these were very much aimed at the public. Other issues, I guess people sometimes find it a little bit frustrating that they can't see all of the results of the search on the screen at the same time. And another big area is people want to contribute information to particular entries, and there's no particularly direct way of doing that we've got anyway at the moment. Maybe there's something in the later developments. We have got a dedicated email address on the front page, but other than that, there's no way of capturing feedback. So we've been looking at sort of Google Analytics over the past few months. I mean, the figures peaked at the launch, and they have dropped off since. So our plans for the future, way forward, I mean, we're conscious that we need to more actively work to engage with the audiences, and we'll be able to do a much more focus on this once we get an officer back in post. We're also in discussions with the Government of Jersey to embed the use of arches in the planning process. As I say, we're not actually directly part of government, so this wasn't an automatic thing. At the moment, the environment team are using it, but few others do. But we have managed to get the use of arches. It's officially now recognised as a key source in the revised island plan, which is our local plan, with the requirement for building, recording and archaeological reports to be published onto arches. We're also looking at various enhancement projects to improve the quality of the records, expand content as ever. Particularly looking at adding a social history context to the building entries. Also looking at adding more historic map overlays and images. Obviously maps and pictures. People love that. And also growing the archaeology content specifically. I mean, we've just completed a LiDAR survey. And we'll be adding in the results of that at some point over the next year or so, and also looking at potential seabed mapping survey which can feed into arches at a later date. At the moment we haven't really got any recording of archaeology or historical interest beyond the sort of foreshore area, so we'll be able to hopefully capture wreck information and hopefully prehistoric surfaces and deposits, etc. Very soon. And then we're also just to try and make arches its presence more visible, even though it's online. We're going to have it more obviously in our local archive, which is the National Archive of Jersey. And then we'll be able to incorporate it with other HER resources and supporting reference collection, which should help. And then, as I say, upgrading to version 5. So it's strange. I mean, it almost feels like we've just finished the setup phase in some respects. There's certainly a lot more work to do, and there's certainly a lot more capability that Arches has got to offer, I think, than we've actually sort of dealt with so far.
Excellent. So was that the?
That was it. Sorry, I've lost you on screen. Where are you? Here we are. Here we go.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for that, Roger. That's I think it's really been a success story. And from my own experience, I found that the public-facing side of it is almost a side benefit to having the system in order to record and make my working life easier. So I wouldn't worry too much about your numbers dropping off. I must confess I didn't even try to record what mine were. I'm simply happy enough to have the train set, shall we say. Is there anything you'd like Peter or David to add at this point from the technical side, or?
Well, only if Peter and David want to add anything to that.
It's Peter. I would just add really that a lot of the capability in version 5 would probably be very useful in terms of what Jersey are trying to achieve at the moment. But it's a big step migrating up to 5.
Okay, well, I'm sure any more specific questions that people have, if you do have questions relating to the technical side of things or to the data migration, things like that, Roger, I'm sure you'll know which of your colleagues to best direct them to. So we'll save those for a little later on. Jude, how's it going?
Fantastic. We've been able to take the test card down, so the girl with the clown has now gone. So we should be on. Kirsty very kindly came over and we're using her kit, so we should be good to go. Okay,
that's excellent.
Thank you, everyone.
I'll pass over to you in a minute, but I'm just quickly going to share something with you that you mentioned clowns, and I heard a joke yesterday that I frankly is too good not to share. What's the quickest way to kill a circus clown? Go for the juggler.
Oh! You're wasted in Lincoln. You're wasted.
I actually got a clip round the ear from my daughter before she went off to school for that one this morning, so it was too good. Anyway, so back to archers. Jude, again from the Isle of Man, to talk about the most recent oh God, what's the word I want? Deployment of archers. Of our colleagues so far. So Jude, over to you.
Thanks, cheers, and thank you for your patience. Right, Kirsty, are you watching? I'm clicking the right buttons on your laptop. So it's that one, yes. How are we doing? Is that looking, can you see my screen?
Yep, that's perfect.
Yep.
Excellent, we're cooking on gas. Okay, so thank you everyone. We're going to be really quick. We're going to be really quick on this, but we're really excited that we've now got archers, and we only went live at the end of March, but we're really to the public on the website, but we're still obviously we're on a journey with it now. So introduce you to Andy, who is our hero. And well, where did this all begin? Well, back in 2018-19, Historic England very kindly extended their HER audit programme to us here in the Isle of Man. Although strictly speaking, obviously we're not part of England. We are a Crown dependency. We are separate from the UK. Nevertheless, they included us in HER audit, and it really told us a lot of things we already knew, and but it helped put that in an audit format that we could then convey to our trustees. And we looked at those 4 service areas. Some of you maybe have already been through such an audit. This was a new thing for us. We'd never done this before, but it really highlighted the need for a dedicated HER system. Because before Arches, our HER was in a collections database called MIMS-EXG, which is more geared towards museum collections, with a slight stop to what they call a sites authority. So we were really keen to move the data out of that database to give it space to breathe and grow. Why do we want to do this? So this is where I'll hand over to Andy partly. Historic England, we're currently part of a consortium bid called UNPATH. And for us, that is about the maritime underwater HER of the Irish Sea. And I'll hand over to Andy to talk about that image on screen.
Well, just very quickly, this is actually the output of some work that we've done with Bangor University, and it takes advantage of some real interest in searching for wrecks in the Irish Sea by staff at the university, and we also have local expertise, a local researcher who's pretty much his life work has been through a combination of being
an excellent diver and also an amazing researcher of documentary sources and archives, who's built up an incredible private database of wrecks around the Isle of Man. As an island, our territorial sea is actually bigger than our terrestrial sort of area, and so we're very conscious that to be part of a wider community of research, but also outputs, digital outputs like this, is a massive opportunity. So we're joining the UNPATH project, and the enhancement of our HER with the inclusion of wreck data will be a step forward.
Yeah, absolutely, and really, it sort of highlights the point why we're so happy that we've now got Arches, in that we can look at projects like this, which were just out of reach before. We now have a home for the HER. But we're also the home of the archaeology collection for the island, and our colleague Alison Fox is our finds archaeologist, and we have museum sites around the island. That's our Viking and Medieval Gallery at the Manx Museum, but obviously any excavations that happen on the island, looking at Andy again, because we're heavily involved in excavation, the finds also come to us.
Yeah, the original sort of genesis of the Monuments record was to build up a management tool that could potentially serve the planning and development community, but it has unfortunately remained an internal service, which has been very, very useful for when I fall under a bus. But our ambition really is that the HER, in serving Manx National Heritage, it provides a management tool for all of the very disparate services that we have as a museum, as Ancient Monuments Inspectorate, as National Trust for the island. It's an important management tool, but of course there's then also the outputs for people involved in planning and development, people involved in academic research, and we think in many ways, most importantly of all, for our sort of hearts and minds side of things, it's about having public access, and Arches gives us something that we simply couldn't aspire to before.
Yeah. So, we're very outward facing in what we do. We also are the home of the National Library and Archives. This is just one photograph from our photographic archive of the War Memorial, which is just over there out the window on Douglas Promenade being unveiled. So we have really rich resources to draw on, and included in that photographic archive are not only photographs of those commemorated on the war memorials, but also photographs of excavation some time ago. That central one in the 1940s. So our challenge was, okay, we wanted a new HER system. We really liked Arches, but the thing that we wanted to make sure of is that we didn't totally decouple our HER from our collections, because that's what really makes us such a rich organisation for our users, in that you can explore the historic environment, but then springboard off that into, well, what is it that actually came out of the ground, and can I go and see that artifact? So the magic that happened for us really was, and for knowledge integration as well, was realizing that the CIIM, our collections information integration middleware, which stores information from our collections database, could act as broker between our collections information and our HER. And I've just done a screenshot there of just some of the records from the CIIM. Obviously, we have images of our collections as well. So just to dip into Arches itself, if I can. Hello. Oh, right, we might do it. Let's see if I can do it as a live link instead. Okay. Obviously, you can go and look at this afterwards at the website. Oh, there we go. Oh, that's good. Wow, worked. Good. Okay, so always astounds us. This is so brand new to us that we're still sort of playing with it, as I imagine all of you still feel like that about your arches as well. So this is the homepage. That's Peel Castle on St Patrick's Isle, which is one of our
flagship sites. Anyway, it's one of the flagship ancient monuments, archaeological sites for the whole of the Isle of Man. So very appropriate to have it on the front page.
Yeah, which Andy knows inside out as well. You always smile when you look at it. So it's nice. So on the homepage, we do have, not going to go into this, but we do have, we really enjoyed what Jersey did here in terms of the YouTube guide, and thank you, Jersey, for being so helpful in showing us, you know, showing me how to do a video tutorial. That's been really great. We work with the, there is a War Memorials Committee on the Isle of Man. That's a government-led committee. And we look after their register of war memorials here. Again, you'll see that image again. And we have a few links to some of our well-known sites. I'm probably not going to have time to go into a live demo, but obviously if you do a search, you all know what arches look like. So I think I'm going to go back to, if I can, back to our slides. How do I do that? Let's see. Let's just minimize that. Okay. So I'm conscious of time. So talking of time, we do have a 3-year roadmap. So this is just the start for us. Getting arches live, getting it installed, getting it onto the government network, getting a support agreement in place with knowledge integration have all been major steps for us. We've achieved that now. Our next part of our roadmap, current roadmap, is our 6 months remote service. And again, I think back, Stuart, to the conversation we had ages ago about arches, and because it's web-based, you don't need licenses. So you can invite users in to deposit data directly into arches. And that's exactly what we're going to be doing in the next 6 months. We've just contracted Trisor to work remotely in moving 4,000 more monument records or resources into the HER, including extracting activity resources out of those as well. We're really conscious of the need to do that. So that's going to be starting in July. And then from November this year, we've had funding for the 2-year HER project officer. Because as all of us,
overworked, etc. But this is a wonderful opportunity really to address various backlogs, but also to focus really comprehensively on various enhancements that we feel are long overdue.
Mm-hmm. And something which is certainly on our development horizon is Sketchfab Viewer. We have a Sketchfab channel where we make available 3D models of the whole corpus of Manx crosses on the island, which are Viking, early medieval crosses. And they're available on Sketchfab, but we know Knowledge Integration has been working with another client in building that viewer so that it sits within arches. Because overall of this is we want to give the user an experience of all the HER resources we have available. And if you visit Isle of Man HER, you'll notice that we do have these things called linked resources. Do I have time to quickly show you an example of that? Very quickly?
Oh, I think so.
Let me just do very quickly. I just want to do a quick example. That one. So zooming in on our war memorial again. So when you click on a pinpoint and something we want to enhance here, you notice there's a link to resources. We'd like that link resources to also appear as a point on here, but we'll see how we can maybe develop that with Farallon. But when you click on linked resources, this is drawing data now from our collections database in real time. So this isn't a static draw, this is a real-time API link up. It has all the people commemorated on that war memorial, but if we go to archive collections, it also gives you items from our collections. So just clicking that. So when you click view related archive, you get the information at the top. This is all information that isn't stored in Arches, it's stored in the CIIM. So we're repurposing this information, and we're also drawing the image down again from the CIIM, not Arches. Now that is what excites us, because we've just started doing this, and it's something I know that Coffline are doing as well. Yeah, and they're using the CIIM also. We'll be learning from them,
We will.
from what they'll be doing, and they'll be conversely learning from us. And that's enough from us. Thanks. Cheers.
Well, Jude, thank you so much. That is fantastic, and what a bombshell to end on. Because I've in Lincoln, I've suddenly become responsible for some 30,000 well, not even 30,000 objects, 30,000 entries in a museum data record system. And apart from being a massive headache, on the other hand, it's a great opportunity to link that material to existing records in the arcade system, which is our Arches implementation. So you can bet, Jude, that I'm going to be knocking on your door in the next year or so to find out exactly how you've done that piece of marvelous wizardry. And I'll also be having a wee word with Neil and Reuben about cost, I should think.
Reuben's been brilliant in this. Reuben Osborne at CIIM, he's been our person who's worked on this, as well as Mark at CIIM, and it's almost like they have sort of learned it from us now. They've kind of learned how to do it, so you can. Yeah,
I can leech off your success. Marvelous.
Yeah.
I know Phil's
Jude,
got his hand up.
Yeah, I've had my hand up for a while now, Matt. Thank you very much.
Well, I didn't want to Phil, but carry on.
My initial hand was put up about the maritime stuff, because obviously we are developing the National Marine HER for England, the MAREA project, which is looking at exactly the same thing, and we're also an UNPATH partner, and so that's going to feed into UNPATH. So anything we develop, we're happy to share, obviously, any models we develop, because and the thinking behind it. It would probably be sensible to have a chat about this and talk about where we're going with MAREA, particularly how we've gone from a single record for the wreck/vessel to a vessel and a wreck, for example. And the thinking that we're putting into MAREA is obviously something that you want to be involved in. I would suggest. The second thing is that I know Neil's on here, and I know Rube's on here as well. Oh. And it would be great if we got any time at all in the agenda, any leeway to get Neil or Reuben to come on and talk about exactly what you've just talked about there, because that linking, that external linking to systems is something we're all going to be interested in, obviously. Is it global digital heritage that they're talking to about the Sketchfab stuff? Because I know that they've already done that. So they've already integrated that into Arches. So I've so many things to ask and talk about.
Make a note of them, Phil. Make a note of them, and we'll come back to them in a bit. I think we can. I'm assuming Neil and Reuben are okay, giving us 5 or 10 minutes of technical speak that'll be completely beyond me, but I feel is going to be very, very useful to colleagues here. I'd be happy for them to do that. Is that okay, guys?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
excellent.
no problem.
Excellent. Sorry, you said Reuben's been brilliant. This is Reuben, is it? Reuben.
Yes. Don't you
Ah.
say anything against Reuben.
I wouldn't dare.
My
The man is a marvel. Excellent. Right.
He's
well,
also
thank you very much.
he's also from Birmingham, so us Brummies have to stick together a little bit.
That was really marvellous, Jude, and thank you very much, and well done on dealing with the teething issues there. That's grand. So let's we're making reasonably good time, I think, but let's now move on to Michael and Crystal from the EAMENA project. Guys, don't feel you need to shorten your presentation because we're running a bit late. Just carry on as you would. I'm sure we're all fine. So over to you.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, can everyone see that?
Yep.
That's looking good.
Great. Okay, so yeah, today I'll just apologies to anyone who's already heard plenty about the EAMENA project, but I'll just do a little bit of background on the EAMENA project, the general database shape, and then Crystal will talk about the MAREA project, and then I'll wrap up by talking about some of the developments we've made with arches, of course, especially with our partners Farallon and Knowledge Integration. Okay, so the EAMENA project is now become a 10-year-long project. Originally started in 2015 to record the archaeological heritage across about 20 different countries from Morocco all the way to Iran. And in addition, we also work with local partners in many of those countries to develop remote sensing and in-field archaeological documentation programs, and we have also designed national implementation databases in arches for a handful of countries, and we're continuing to do so. And we're just about to introduce an implementation of arches for Palestine. And then soon Jordan after that, and so forth. And basic EAMENA methodology is to use Google Earth to identify sites and record them initially. And you can see on the left we work within a custom grid. And then we use a variety of ways to mobilize data from geographic facts in something like Google Earth, or in some cases we'll use a GIS system. And in other cases we'll enter data directly into arches. But one of the main ways that we do this is to once we identify the sites in Google Earth, add them to what we call a bulk upload sheet. This is a little bit different than your standard CSV import sheet for arches. It's custom made, and it addresses, I'll come back to this later when we talk about developments for arches, but this addresses the hierarchical nature of arches data structuring. And so we can have multiple parents with N cardinality. We can have who can have multiple children with N cardinality, and then those children can have N cardinality, and all of that can be accurately ingested into our arches database. And you can see the conventions that we use. I won't go through all of them, but we use rows and pipes, pipe separated values in some cases where we have children with N cardinality. And that enables us to have very complex graph shapes, and yet still have this sort of simplicity of site identification and interpretation, and then ingestion. As you can see, we've been quite busy. We have now about 340,000 resources in the database. About 190,000 of those are heritage places or archaeological sites. And here's our cover page. We modified it a little bit from the default so that we have a sort of horizontal slider. So many nice images. You can go check them out if you like at database.emena.org. Here we have, this is what our map looks like, and you can see we have the grid as its own resource model, essentially. And these are basic resource models. It's obviously heritage places, the main one. We mostly record archaeological sites, but as Crystal will discuss shortly, we're now also recording paleo landscapes, environmental data, and we can delve deeper into site condition assessments, and then of course we have a massive number of archival photographs, aerial photography, historical photos of sites, and anything else. All kinds of resources in our information resource model. So here is one particular site, and this is basic. This is our heritage place resource model. These are at least the top cards in it. I don't want to get too much into the branches and that, because we would be here forever. But one useful thing to note is that for every kind of we look at recording as an event itself, and it's all interpretive, and so for every assessment there's usually some kind of certainty value. So if it's a condition assessment and say, okay, well, what is the degree of disturbance or threat, and then what is our level of certainty of that, and that really makes that really makes analysis, I think, much more valuable on the other end. And one of the other so by the way, we're on Arches 5. We're on Arches 5.2, 5.2.0B0, technically speaking. And one aspect of Arches 5 that I think we've really made good use of is the resource instance node. And this has this feature of Arches 5, I think, is really incredible, because it allows you to embed resource to resource relationships into your resource models. And so it lends a whole other kind of semantic understanding and capability to your modeling that that really enables you to talk about site hierarchies and relationships between across resource models. And an example of this, as a segue, is here under archaeological assessment. You can identify a related geoarchaeology instance of the geoarchaeology resource model. And so to do this, you just select the node, and then you get a drop-down list that's populated by that resource model. And then of course you can choose one. If you know which one is related, then you choose it, or you can create a new one right there on the spot, and you get a window where you can add some more. You can add some of the data, some of the basic data, right there, and then you can go back to that record later and flesh it out more. but it's enormously effective, and it also it does a lot of things, but it also helps bridge this gap between if you want to use a string field, if you think about using a string field, but you want it to be a little bit more standardized and controlled, add those to the RDM. That's a clunky system that a lot of users aren't going to be able to access. Because we are a public-facing database. I forgot to mention, we publicly launched back in May, and so we want people to be able to add their own name, but not have to go through the RDM to do it, but not add their own name, 7 different versions of it. And the resource instance node enables you to add it. You add it once, and then the next time you just select it, so it's standardized. And with that, I will stop sharing my screen, send it over to Crystal.
This is probably just a good time to note that Phil has got his hand up again.
I do indeed. With respect to the resource instance, it is, as you say, it's a game changer, Michael. But I noticed, so you're basically just selecting your resource instances. So what we've got as part of the applications consultations module within Greater London is the ability to put your point on the map and then intersect with geometries of other resources, and then it automatically associates those instances with your new geometry. So basically you just go, here's my point on the map, what's it related to, what does it intersect in, what does it join with, and is that the kind of functionality you would like to have? Because it's there in if you just use resource map card, I think is the key card to use. Tell me if I'm, teaching my grandmother to suck eggs, please.
We do use that in some of the cases. Yes, it depends on how we deploy it, but right though. We should probably push that aspect of it more because it is brilliant.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Phil. Over to you, Crystal.
Yes, I'm just gonna share my screen. Right, is that all good? Great, so I'm just going to briefly introduce the MAREA project for those of you who have not heard of it, and just focus on some of the more maritime specific enhancements to the EAMENA database, because within the MAREA project, we rely and use the EAMENA database that Mike just introduced. So MAREA is an Arcadia-funded project, just like the EAMENA, and the aim of the project is to document and assess maritime culture, heritage, and threats across the Middle East and North Africa. So this is within the coastal region and underwater. It's a 5-year project, so it started in 2019. It is based at the University of Southampton, also University, PI'd by Dr. Lucy Blue and Colin Breen. So we work really closely with the EAMENA team, with government bodies in the MENA region, with NGOs, academics, consultants, and experts. Now, our objectives mainly is to comprehensively and rapidly document maritime culture heritage across the region. And this is this will enable us to kind of focus on areas at risk, areas that need on-ground surveying or fieldwork. And so we do undertake fieldwork and surveying, and we work closely with the local regional partners, depending on the needs that appeal to them. So we undertake as well, like the EAMENA project, assessment of the condition and threats of all of that archaeology. And this is with the purpose of developing an improved understanding of the nature and extent of culture and maritime culture heritage in MENA. So we integrate all of that data in EAMENA's database, and we also develop tools for the management of maritime culture heritage, working with government bodies and departments of antiquities. So similar to that grid that Mike had shown, so we focus just on we have a coastal grid that focuses on the coastal region, as you can see here on the bottom map. So we focus on the coastal plain and on the nearshore plain. And the priority areas, so we focus on areas that are of high density for archaeological evidence, or areas that are subjected to imminent threats. And our sources are, we rely on academic literature, on fieldwork reports, satellite imagery, obviously Google Earth, or declassified imagery, archives, old historical maps, and so on. So when we first started we first started the project in 2019, and obviously because we're using the EAMENA database, and one of the main resource model that we use is the heritage place to document archaeological site. So when we first started, we needed to expand on that control vocabulary that was already existing in the EAMENA for certain specific fields of data. So for instance, you can see here, let me just put my pointer on. So you can see here within the interpretation of the archaeological site, so it wasn't just enough to say whether it's a shipwreck. We added more terms in terms of, depicting whether this is a submarine, a warship, a sailing vessel, and even with the topography. So we've added terms that really reflect that coastal topography, marine topography. Are we working with the delta, estuary, coastal cliff, and so on? And with the threats, so when we're conducting condition assessment, we've added more terms that depict that maritime environment threats that are acting on the maritime environment, so like trawling and dredging, or coastal advanced accretion and coastal erosion. So that was the first step, kind of to integrate those new terms to already existing fields of data, so that we are able to start documenting maritime culture heritage across the region. Now, the second step was to think a bit more in terms of how we want to enhance that heritage place recording and in order to contextualize maritime archaeology. And so one thing we did was the implementation of an environment assessment card. So this is particularly important for the maritime environment because it gives us an understanding of the kind of preservation and the energy that is acting upon that coastline. So within that environment assessment card, we're able now to record the information about the geology, so bedrock geology, superficial geology, and the depositional process. So how was that superficial geology deposited, marine, aeolian, and so on. And we have a specific collection for the marine environment, so telling us about the energy of the environment, about the fetch, wave climate, and tidal energy. And again, about the depth, so how deep is the site underwater, and so on. So that environment assessment card is not just being used now for maritime heritage sites, but is being used for all of the heritage places that are being documented on the EAMENA database, so also for terrestrial sites. Now, the third thing we did was to implement a new geoarchaeology resource model. And this is particularly significant for the maritime and coastal zone because it tells us about paleocoastlines, paleogeography, how that landscape has changed, and what is the indication for the preservation of archaeological material. So within the geoarchaeology resource model, we kind of followed the heritage place. So instead of like reinventing the wheel, we followed the heritage place structure. But instead of having an archaeological assessment, we have a geoarchaeology assessment. And within that geoarchaeology assessment, we can input the, whether we're dealing with a feature sediment or a feature landform. So a sediment based on cores and boreholes, prehistoric evidence of prehistoric occupations. And in the feature landform, so you have an example here of the kind of like terms that we use in terms of a ridge, terrace, platform, or a cave, and what that is interpreted as. So is that terrace, is it a marine terrace, is it a seabed, a shoreline, and so on. And within the geoarchaeology as well resource model, so we've added a kind of process indicator. So what is that evidence tell us about what is it indicating? Is it indicating a sea level rise, a tectonic subsidence, a tectonic uplift, and so on? And for all of these as well, we have the dating, so we can date all of these features, be it landform or sediment. So at the moment, this was incorporated recently, although we've been working on it for quite a while, but it's now live with the new recent relaunch of the database. So we're just starting to add that geoarchaeological data set to the database. So we have, we're just starting to add it, but we have a backlog of data. So this will, we will have quite a lot of records quickly within the next couple of months. And this is particular, I think I'm not aware of any kind of a database that consolidates that geoheritage, because it's a form of geoheritage for the whole MENA region. So it's quite unique for that region, the fact that we are able to consolidate all of that geoarchaeological information and, like Mike said, relate it to the heritage places, relate, the archaeology to actually what is happening, how that landscape has been modified, and where the paleocoastlines and paleogeography, how did it look like. So that's more or less what I want to say in terms of MAREA and in terms of our usage and how we've enhanced the EAMENA database for the maritime specific elements. And of course we have as well on the project Dr. R. Smith. He is the database expert, and he works very closely with Mike and very closely with the EAMENA team on all of the database development and maintenance, because we're using the same database, so it's important for it to work as we would like it to work. So I'll Mike, you can take over again. Yes.
Cool. Thank you, Crystal. Okay, so I just wanted to show some of the things that some of the custom, well, most of the developments that we've either designed or worked with Farallon or Knowledge Integration to design are part of Core Arches. Some are not, but this is back to the site of prehistoric site in Syria, Tel Zaydan, that you've seen. But to note here is that we're now able to drag and drop KML files directly into the map, and also able to directly edit the coordinates here, and also you can change the geographic reference system as well now, and you can add whichever ones you want in your settings file. And this was something that our partners really wanted, and our local partners, especially in Jordan and Lebanon, were interested in this, and I think it makes things a bit easier. We also, this is another request from coming from Jordan, based on their Mega Jordan database, that they wanted to be able to add a kind of buffer zone around the site without having to redraw the geometry. And so we worked with Farallon to develop this functionality. And basically, you just select your geometry, and then you enter whatever distance you want, and you have the option of adding it as a new tile, or as like a multi-geometry, a multi-polygon within the same tile, by just checking that box or not. And going back to the question of connectivity with GIS applications for QGIS, which is of course, as mentioned, this is more along the lines of the ethos of Arches, this open source software. So our projects primarily use QGIS, and what we wanted to do is we wanted to start that process of development, and so there's always a number of ways to move your data into a GIS system, but we wanted a sort of simple one that didn't actually have to constantly tax the database, because we have like 200,000 sites. So what we developed with Farallon was a GeoJSON endpoint, which when you create your query set, as long as it's less than 2,000 sites, and I know that's a restriction, but that's pretty standard for all exports. So as long as it's within those constraints, then you'll have the option of a GeoJSON URL, and you just copy that to your clipboard. You go to QGIS, and you add a vector layer, select protocol, GeoJSON, dump your URL here. You can authenticate or not, depending on how your Django permissions are set up. If your geometries are available to anonymous users, then you don't need to authenticate. And that's it. And then you'll get your distribution, you'll get all of your data, boom, right there. And what's nice about this, unlike shapefile, well, there's a lot of advantages over shapefiles, of course, because shapefiles truncate, they truncate your fields. they'll but what I see as the main advantage is that it's not 100% live, like connecting your database directly to QGIS, but it is sort of semi-live in the sense that every time you refresh your data frame or reload your project in QGIS, it will re-access that API endpoint. And so you don't have to worry about versions of shapefiles or anything like that. So it obviously doesn't go in the other direction. So this is unidirectional connectivity at this point, but we see this as a sort of first step, and that creating the plugin on the QGIS side can work with this tech. One of the other things that we're developing, we're actually very close to finishing, but I'll just like mention this as a preview, is getting I discussed this earlier, getting the hierarchical data in was, that took some effort to design that, and as Crystal mentioned, Ash Smith at MarEA project wrote the code for that, and we designed the templates, and the question then becomes, okay, well, how do you get hierarchical data out of arches? And this is, depending on your graph shapes, this may or may not be relevant, but at EAMENA, we have extraordinarily complex graph shapes, and we never want to sacrifice, the ability to convey our interpretations, and arches enables you to not have to make that sacrifice until you want to export your data. And so we've been working with Feral on how to get your data out where it's with accuracy. So as I mentioned, we have degree, so if there's a particular threat to a site, we have a degree of that threat, and then we have certainty of that, and you can see how it gets quite complex if you want to just dump it to a CSV file. So what we have now is an Excel export that this is just a sort of hint at what it kind of looks like, but basically it turns every node group into a tab, and so you can have so if you have multiple values for that node group, that they will get multiple tabs, but then the next card will have a tab or multiple tabs, and you can see how it can be. It'll be huge, but what'll be nice about it is that it's 100% accurate. So if you want to take hierarchical data and move it into analytical programs, then you can do it, and you know that the data is 100% correct, and there's no ambiguity or anything like that. And then finally, what we've developed with Farallon, we have many international partners. We work in a part of the world where Arabic is the primary language. There are other languages, including Persian, and these are right to left languages. And so, we needed to be able to have this database not just be bilingual, but be translingual, so that you can enter something in Arabic, and if it's a concept, then the corresponding concept will appear on the English side in English. And so we've been able to do this to a degree. And so right now you can add languages to your settings file, and then you just select them from this drop down up here, English, Arabic, Spanish, whichever you'd like, and then it'll convert the concept lists. Now, and as you can see, we have slashes in the card labels and places like that, because that's the next step. Dynamically loaded pages, etc. So right now we're in the process of designing and then ultimately implementing what's called the full internationalization of Arch's, and it's pretty exciting. I think it'll open up Arch's usability to the entire world, independent of which language somebody is most comfortable in. But right now it's functional in multiple languages, at least as far as concept lists go. We are working on, so that's what we've been able to do so far. Actually, one other thing I should mention is when it comes to the forms, you can kind of get a hint of it here. This is something that Ash Smith and I developed, which is a custom card, which, like I said, our graphs are fairly complex, and being able to get all of those nested nodes into the same card wasn't really possible without designing a custom card in Arches. And so we've been able to do this, and it's worked really quite well, where you can have a single form, basically, so you don't have to constantly go back to the card tree, find the next card, and go down. You can see it all in a single form. And this is not live, so I can't scroll to show you, but basically the entire archaeological assessment card is all visible right here in the same form. And so, we have, so that's what we've been able to do so far. We're working with knowledge integration right now for what we call ring fencing data, which would enable you to apply custom permissions to entire data sets instead of just to individual records at the same time. And then the next step, I think, will be linked open data. So I was really excited to hear about the CIIM, and hopefully can continue to have discussions about the best ways to link data sets across different applications and data types and so forth. Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you very much for that. That was remarkably interesting, and I think there's a lot of useful things. I mean, I'm aware that the subject matter may not be UK based, but the talent pool that I think we're talking about here certainly is. So it's great to see so many things that we can all benefit from in a kind of very open source way. I see Philip's got his hand up again. Phil?
I do. Yeah, I'm interested in the custom card that you've made there, Mike. Does it solve the issue of importing nested data?
The card itself doesn't address that. It's the bulk upload functionality does, and that's something that that Ash wrote custom code for. One of the exciting things, I mean, it's quite elegant the way that it works. Perhaps if we want to get into technical details, Ash could jump in, but so we had to design the template, the bulk upload template that I showed, and then Ash wrote the custom code to convert, basically convert your Excel sheet into Arches JSON and validate it. So there's a lot of steps involved in it. And before just seeing if Ash wants to add anything, I'll just say that we're currently in the process of all of that's highly custom. So the custom card, it's the visual way of dealing with the data. Yeah. It doesn't do anything under the hood. I mean, there's a lot under the hood. Ash wrote the code for that too, and he could get into the details there as well. But so that's sort of like the back end way of ingesting the data, and then the front end way of viewing it, of viewing nested hierarchical data. The card is available. All of the JSON and is available. The JavaScript is all available in our GitHub account, so you can go and you can scrape it there and see if it's useful to you for front end. But as when it comes to ingesting the hierarchical data, this is just completely custom code at the moment. But we're working with Farallon and a few other partners to turn it into core arches. So there will be an arches release. I mean, we hope, at least this is what our plans are, is that there will be an arches release, perhaps even this year, that will make that available to everybody.
Yeah, because this is the holy grail, really, as far as we're concerned, for importing data, particularly where you've got nested cards and then the nested card has multiple values. Because what we found is when you append, what it does is it creates the entire nested card again, as I'm sure you're aware. I would be interested in having a chat with Ash about this. I'm not that technical, but it's certainly something we are very, very interested in. Myself and George Brusecker, who sits on the CRM SIG, we're looking at a way of automating this process so that you wouldn't have to hardwire the JSON templates, that you'd be able to create them on the fly. And we think we're getting there using the CRM 3M tool to create a mapping which can then then use to create JSON from. And if that solves this problem, then great. But at the moment, we're sort of like, we're looking around to see what's out there, and this is certainly an excellent, from my point of view, development. If we can sort of like maybe piggyback off it, or start a conversation about how we solve this. And obviously Dennis is more than aware of this as well, as you've said and as you know. So yeah, great stuff. But yeah, if we can start that conversation, certainly we are very interested in what you're doing there.
So I think if we take 10 minutes for that comfort break that was mentioned earlier, does anyone object if we go over time? Does anyone have to leave immediately? Well, now we've got so what I'm thinking is, if we take 10 minutes, in that 10 minutes, if you've got specific questions, any of you, for the speakers so far, if you can come back and then just stick your hands up, and then I'll take us through them one by one. Then I think it's worth us taking a little bit of time to just run through the attendees and see who's got what projects on the go. Just a quick sort of 2 or 3 minute overview with no repetition, no stopping, sort of thing. And then I think Stu has put on here that we need to talk about the group terms of reference as well. So we have still got a bit to get through. Are we all happy doing that, bearing in mind that we've now got half an hour left of the meeting time? I'm proposing that we move another half hour past that as well.
If anybody has to go, obviously it's being recorded, so you're not going to miss anything.
Great, that's good to know as well, Stuart. But yeah, we're good to stay.
Excellent. Well, I'm not hearing any massive dissent. So let's take 10 now. Let's take 8 now. Sorry, I've jabbered on. And we'll be let's say we'll be back here at 22. And if you can be back here with hands raised if you want to ask questions, that'd be great. Okay.
Cool. Thank you.
Well, I think we're all slowly coming back to the meeting. Give it a couple more minutes. Just I have to say, among the many problems with online meetings, I think the fact that you can't see people come back to the table is one of the big ones. That and the absence of biscuits and sandwiches. On that note, can I see some hands up for questions if we have any?
Was that Graham? Did Graham flash?
It was.
Yes,
I did. This is a practical question. First in, hi, I'm Graham Appleby, City Archaeologist here in Leicester. We've been looking at arches on and off for a couple of years. We're looking to replace our current system for various reasons. One of the questions which I'm asked is, how much is the annual service cost? So those of you who've implemented, in terms of the support from your providers or support wings, how much is the annual cost to you in direct outlay, if you're able to answer?
Sorry. I'm just checking. Yeah, so go for it.
I was going to say, that's, I mean, there is no one answer to that, Graham. really. I mean, you'll note that we have colleagues from Knowledge Integration here who are one service provider who can answer you that question. But I think given the terms of this group, that should probably be a conversation that happens offline. I think if you want to go external to someone like Knowledge Integration, there is obviously going to be an upfront. There's going to be a cost that's going to appear on your annual budget. There is also the alternative that your in-house IT team could potentially maintain it on an ongoing basis. That might work out as a cost that you could more easily lose in your annual budget. So I think that's something that it's not really, I think, a question that we could or should answer in this forum, but I think there are people on this forum who can help you come to an answer there. So
yeah, just to say, Graham, more than happy for you to get in touch with myself and Andy via email. You've got our email address as part of it. We've taken out support with Knowledge Integration, and that works very well for us because Knowledge Integration also support our CIIM, which obviously, oh, I can see Neil. There's Neil. Hi, Neil. Which obviously there's a real benefit in that because we can talk across both products. But more than happy for you to we do have support with Knowledge Integration. We do have a government IT team, but it's a shared service. And when it's specialist, what they regard as specialist software, they do look to departments to, find their own support providers. We are
I
able
thought that might be the case.
Yeah, we are able to give Knowledge Integration remote access to our servers for working, directly onto the server. So that's how that works for us. But happy for you to email me after this.
I will drop you an email, Kirsty, if that's kind. Thanks, Alastair.
Oh, sorry, I'm still as Kirsty because I'm logged in as Kirsty, which I don't mind.
Sorry, Jude.
Being that she's our boss, but it's Jude, Nancy.
Sorry, Jude. Thanks, Kirsty, for using the laptop.
Okay, can I just add to that? This is Neil. We did a discovery project for East Sussex County Council about the costs of migrating from their existing HER system, which, obviously we included our own costs in there, but we also looked at internal costs. I know that Sophie's been happy to share that with other HERs. Some of it is specific to East Sussex, but I think a lot of it is generic, and a lot of it is based, that was HBSMR in that case, so a lot of it was based on the work that Stuart and Phil have been doing as well. So obviously that was a client confidential report, so I can't share that, but I know that Sophie's been happy to share it with other HERs.
And just to add to that,
I can try to drop you an email as well.
I think it's probably quite important as well that you make it, in any sort of proposal, that you make it quite clear that the cost of migration versus the cost of support. I mean, those are two different things. The cost of support is an Archer's related cost. The cost of migration is simply the cost of you leaving your current system for any other system.
This is where.
Sorry,
this is where it's a two-pronged attack in terms of identifying costs. And as you know from my previous attempt, that we identified these costs, but the world has moved on a couple of years. And what I'm being asked specifically at the moment is that annual cost. Maybe we take this offline though, Neil and Jude and Mac, so we can have other questions. But thank you very much. Cheers.
Okay. Junaid, do I pronounce you correctly?
Yes, thank you. That's correct. Thank you for arranging this session to Stuart and everyone else. And I will just start with a quick introduction because I have been in contact with some people, but not all. So I am Junaid Abdul-Jabbar and working with the MAHSA project. MAHSA project is the mapping of archaeological heritage in South Asia. We are focusing on the Pakistan and northwestern India, mainly along the Indus River basin. So I'm mainly taking care of the arches. We have started with the arches 5.1, but 5.2 is offering pretty good additional functionality. So hopefully we will be looking into that as well. And right now we are trying to find our way around these very rich and complex heritage examples that come combined with a lot of challenges, like Philip also highlighted, these nested import of data attributes and all sorts of these things. But yeah, I think we will be there. But for now, I have two questions. One is toward Stuart and one for Judy. So I mean, all of these custom developments that you have just shown, these are very useful, and I mean, of course, a lot of resources and time have been put into these. But I mean, are these available on any GitHub repository, or how are these all managed? These developments, or are these gradually going to become the part of core arches? Or yeah, first question is that, and mainly second question is maybe I can put it on the table now. Is about that external API that you showed us linking and pulling the data in the link data structure. Have you explored the mainly tapped the area of IIIF image resources, because some of the libraries and repositories are really publishing their resources as IIIF that provides a very rich access, and Arches 5.1 and so on, they are also enhancing that capability for Arches as well. So I mean, yeah, that's my second question. Thank you.
Yeah, hi, welcome to the group. The Arches for HER, once it's finished, will be put up onto the repository for anybody to use. There's nothing there that anybody can't use. You know, we're developing a system that can be used, you know, primarily for any historic environment record. But obviously anything that we develop that other people may find of use, they're very happy to use it.
Right, thank you.
Yeah, on the IIIF, it's not something I'm well aware of that. Our backend database is MIMSyXG, which is an Axial product. And I know other Axial product users, like the British Film Institute, have really gone full storm with IIIF and have used that. It's not something we've done at the moment, but you're absolutely right. We do have a very rich image collection. So it is something we should explore. And I'm looking at Neil now, or Reuben. Neil, Reuben, is a IIIF something you've done in terms of the CIIM?
Yeah, so CIIM supports IIIF as one of its many endpoints. And we actually use the same grouping functionality to define sets for IIIF as we do for other things such as OAI PMH. So if you want to export things to Europeana, for example, you can define sets arbitrarily. So yeah, so we would generally, for people like yourselves who have a CIIM interface, the route to IIIF would be out of Arches into CIIM and implement IIIF on CIIM. Whether there are plans for native support of IIIF within Arches, I would defer to Farrell on.
But I mean, I've learned something there, and I think this is why we're quite excited about. We've also got to be realistic, and we've got to have a plan of what we want to achieve, because there's just so many options being opened up to us by using the CIIM with Arches. Our challenge, as we're such a small team as well, and a challenge to CAAL is deciding what our end users want. What do we actually want to achieve at the end of it? So for us, Sketchfab is a really important one, the 3D models at the moment, because we already have that product and we just want to put it in the way of people and make it a bit more visible as well. But thanks. No, you've got me thinking about IIIF now.
I know that.
Yeah, no, I hadn't thought about it in relation.
I know that Arches for Science, the Disco project, is certainly certainly using IIIF, and there is obviously the IIIF data type in 5.2, and I think even in 4.1 the IIIF data type was there. So yeah, it's definitely something that's being worked on for Arches for Science, and anything that is useful for HER will be trickled into that as well. I know that the core archers, any functionality that is deemed useful for all instances will be copied over.
Yeah, really. I mean, yeah, you're right about that. And I think, maybe later it would be really useful to explore more into this external API linking functionality. And I think as a part of our project, we will be spending some time with all of this IIIF ecosystem and with artists. So I am happy to share once we are there, happy to share with everyone how we get along with it. Thank you.
Fantastic. Right.
So are there any other questions for specific relating to specific presentations? Nope. Okay, then I guess if we move on quickly then to, so we've had some presentations from people doing Archers related projects, and I don't think they need to give us a 2 to 3 minute update of what they're doing. But if anyone else on the chat would like to give us a couple of minutes of information about projects that they're doing at the moment, that would be great. If you put your hands up, I'll come to you one by one. Okay, and okay, any more for any more? Okay, so we've got 4 hands up. I'm going to start up with Aylin, if that's correct, who put his hand up first. Right, so let me mute myself.
Yeah, okay, here we go. I'm Aylin Orbasli. I'm here from Oxford Brookes University. We're running the Endangered Wooden Architecture Programme, which will run on Archers once we get going. We're currently working with Knowledge Integration, Neil and Reuben, so it's really good to hear you all being very supportive of Reuben, so that's looking forward to that relationship. So I'm on a learning curve here. It will be a grant giving program, so the data will be gathered by grantees and then brought into the database. So at the moment we don't know where those grants, they will be worldwide, so we're probably going to be having issues with things like language and terminology, particularly for timber elements and parts. So we're currently in the process of sort of identifying various fields of metadata. So today's been very useful to me in sort of just understanding some of the challenges and sort of what's going on, and hopefully in the future we'll have more to contribute as we start developing.
Well, yes, that would be really interesting to see how you get on with that. One of the things that we're doing in Lincoln is a project where it's our local list project, and it involves opening up limited data entry in Archers to non-specialists for vetting by specialists. So, you know, I don't know if that might be something that you want to have a chat with us about how our experience of that is. I can't necessarily tell you it's been particularly good at the moment, but at the very least we're learning some things. So thank you for that, and I look forward to hearing more updates.
Okay.
Excellent. If we can go on to Mahmoud now.
Hi everyone, I'm Mahmoud Abdelrazek. I am working as the database developer for the sister project to MAHSA. So basically Junaid for MAEASaM, which is mapping endangered archaeological sites and monuments in Africa. Working with Professor Paul Lane and maybe Stefania Merlo. I don't know if I've encountered any of them before, but we are at the very start. So we still just spin up the node, and we're trying to design our resource models at the moment and sort of streamline the data collections. So we have many more questions than things to share. So I don't know, maybe if we have time, maybe at the end I can just throw in a few questions and see if anyone would be interested in maybe communicating and helping us a bit. It'd be fantastic. So yeah, thank you very much.
Certainly. Well, it's great to see you joining the group. One of the main purposes behind it is to enable the sort of knowledge sharing for from people who are at a more advanced stage of development of their projects to people who, as you say, if you're just starting out, you've got questions. With regards to resource models, I think we've got a lot of expertise just in this group. I wonder if it's worth I don't know, I'd like to say having some form of WhatsApp group for this kind of thing. That might be a little bit informal, but I don't know, something of that sort, so that we have a kind of live forum whereby you can bounce questions and potentially get really quick answers from the right person. I don't know whether or not that's something we can set up. Maybe we'll look at that in a moment, but certainly, you know, welcome to the group, and we'll look forward to seeing how you develop and helping you in that as you go forward. Okay, Rebecca Roberts.
Hi, yeah, thank you. I just wanted to add, so Junaid has already briefly introduced the MAHSA project, which is Mapping Archaeology and Archaeological Heritage in South Asia. So we're another Arcadia funded project. So I just wanted to give a brief overview of what we're doing. We're actually a little bit, we're about a month or so behind in starting with the MAEASaM project, but we are sister projects based in Cambridge. So we're all working quite closely together. And our project, we're mainly working, so we're working with legacy data, so historic data that has been collected in the past, and more recent field survey data. We're working with remote sensing. We're also using historic map sheets that were created by the Survey of India during the British colonial period, and we'll be using machine learning techniques, technology to identify potential archaeological sites. And the historic maps element also has this is where we're coming at the IIIF angle as well, because these map sheets are currently held in the UK legal deposit libraries, and so we're digitising map sheets, but with an aim for them to be accessible in the future, hopefully through Arches, and pointed that way. And then we're also working to do some future fieldwork and ground truthing of the sites as well. So we've got quite a lot of different data strands that are coming into our Arches database. But it's very great to meet everybody. And yeah, as Mahmoud said, we're currently at the sort of the absorbing phase of doing things, but hopefully we'll soon have some useful things to share back to the group as well. So thank you.
That's great to hear. Really, I think it really highlights the problems with this sort of online meeting, which is that it would be ideal if we could all sort of mingle around some cups of tea and biscuits and actually have these conversations. The networking aspect, I think, is a real loss, and has been over the last year and a half. So the sooner we can get back to that, the better. But again, if we can have some kind of, I don't know, live online version of that, I think that would be super helpful. So
yeah, there are sorry. No. I was going to say a couple of suggestions for that. And one for the chat, what you suggested about the chat would be perhaps setting up a Slack channel. I would suggest Teams, but it's a bit tricky if you're not already on an organizational Teams account, but yeah. Slack, at least everybody can sign up for, so we could do that. And then there are things, there's Wander, for example, which allows you to create a virtual coffee room, as it were, and there are other things that allow you to do similar things. It's never going to be quite the same, but yeah, we can maybe think about those platforms.
Well, certainly we've used when we were putting together the Lincoln implementation of Arches, we used Slack a lot to keep in touch with the development team over at Knowledge Integration and with colleagues over at Farallon, and it was super helpful. So I think maybe we look into putting together a Slack channel. Stu, let's you and I talk about that after.
There is an Arches project Slack, which we could easily add a channel to.
That would be right. Then I think we'll do that, and we'll send invitations around shortly, because then I think Jude, sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think something that we'd find useful for sharing with our trustees and other colleagues is almost like a very brief site report from each person. Sort of like, so who you are and what project you're currently working on, because we've just been sat here listening to some of these projects going, wow, wow, wow. And what we'd really like to do is share that almost as a very simple document. And obviously we would add our site report. I'm not talking about paragraphs from everybody, but almost like, hello, we've got Arches. This is what we're currently doing with it. I know we do that as part of the MIMSI user group, and it's just a great way of, picking up the document when you're ready and seeing, right, who's working on what again? Oh, right. Oh, and then like a contact name if it's something you want to I don't know, just an idea.
Well, I can see that being very helpful, actually, Jude. And
but very chatty and very brief, not reads of.
Yes, we can easily have some kind of shared storage area where you can put some documents of that sort. So we'll explore methods of doing that, because I'd really like to be able to capture the whole sort of the whole water cooler chat thing that we miss so much of in this kind of forum. Okay. So I'm going to quickly move on then to Neil, who's also had his hand up for a little while there. Neil Smith from Knowledge Integration.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. So in terms of projects, the other main UK project that we've been working on is with the Royal Commission for Ancient and Historic Monuments Wales, which was the relaunch of the Covelaine site. So that's very similar to the project that we did for Jude. So it uses our CIIM middleware again. CIIM in this case is brokering information from Archers and from Atom, which is an open source archival management system, and it's using the same developments we did in terms of pushing changes from Archers to the CIIM using an API built on top of the edit table, which Reuben wrote and can talk about for those of interested in the technical detail, is what we've been doing there. So just wanted, since I don't think there's anyone from the Royal Commission on the call, just thought I'd mention that project.
That's really interesting, and something that occurred to me as I was watching the excellent presentation about the EAMENA project. The sort of bilingual nature of that project, or multilingual actually, is that something that you've looked into for? Well, I mean, obviously doing work in Wales where Welsh is an official language. Is that functionality that you're trying to incorporate there as well?
The Covelaine site is multilingual. Yes, the extent to which I think all the terms in the RDM that we've imported from heritage data are all multilingual as well. I don't think they've gone to the extent of making all the site descriptions multilingual. I'm not sure. I think that's a work in progress.
I think they've got special dispensation not to have to translate however many thousand records.
Yeah. The National Museum has the same dispensation for the same reason.
But certainly for the user interface, the ability to be able to deliver that in Welsh as well as English, I think should that be a direction that they want to go down, I think that the expertise and the skills that have been built up over the years could be really helpful there. I really wanted to touch on that just as part of my general wonder at how we've managed to achieve, I think, over the last 4 or 5 years, a community of projects that is based on the same foundations, but nonetheless has been customizable for wildly different needs, while retaining, a level of standardization that I think is useful from a technical side, but from a delivery and interrogation side, the customizability is something wonderful, and I think not something that we've had in the UK HER sector before. So, congratulations.
Totally echo that, and I think for us, for today, everyone that's talked about underwater archaeology and maritime, we're hugely excited about that, because we're starting on that journey. But it's great to know there's so much expertise out there, and that's why I suppose I'm wondering, if there's like a simple sites report, it could just be a Google Doc that we want to remember these people we want to contact, basically. So it's purely selfish reasons.
All the best reasons are. I think that's how we progress in these things. Right, Phil, you've got your hand up again.
I believe Bryan got in first, actually. So.
Oh, well, that's very civil of you, Phil. Very civil. I'll pass you, Bryan, then, please.
Okay. Well, I just thought I'd overcome my shyness and put forward myself as the representative of the CAAL project, which is it's a partnership between UCL Institute of Archaeology, ICAS, and the Northwest University in the People's Republic of China. It's another Arcadia-funded project, which is gathering together the existing archives and records monuments and, in fact, all elements of heritage really from Central Asia.
Okay. And
again,
another.
Yeah, we've gathered about 50,000 records now, and we're hoping we're just moving our platform onto UCL's site and hoping to go live within the next couple of months. Okay.
Fantastic. Okay, Phil, over to you.
It was just something that Aylin said about terminologies, and I'm just putting this out there. The creation of terminologies is a ridiculously time-consuming and expensive process, and if there is something out there that you can reuse it, you know. And we are obviously, Neil mentioned Heritage Data, Historic England, the Royal Commission for Wales, and Historic Environment Scotland host that Heritage Data site to freely make available all of our control vocabularies in a SCOS format, which you can download and use in your Archers instance. They do go in. Sometimes you have to force them in through the command line because they're quite big, but they do go in quite nicely, quite easily. And I did realise that we've got a timber structural elements vocabulary that we use within HE that might be something that the EWAP project could make use of, or at least use as a skeleton to start with. I've not yet SCOSified it though, so I'll have to pull my finger out and sort that out. But yeah, so I'm just sort of saying, if you have got in your instance, you've got specialised vocabularies that you've created for your project that may be useful, sharing those, and we would quite happily host those on Heritage Data. It's a non-partisan, it's a .org, it's not a .uk. It's there for Heritage Data to be shared. So if you're at all interested in that process and making those available through that, I'm quite happy to talk you through what you need to do to get it on there. So just saying,
yeah.
don't waste your time creating something if something's already there. Yeah.
So can I contact you directly? And
absolutely, yeah.
Excellent. Okay, so I've right. You can put your hand down now, Phil.
Yes, I've just done that, Mac.
Thank you. So I can see I've got 2 more questions. Another one from Mahmoud.
Yeah, I think Reuben has his hand before me though.
I'm glad you're all on top of this because
you can go first.
Fisticuffs might break out if it was left to me. Reuben, go on then.
No, I just wanted to mention that I've pulled together a quick 5 minutes on the CIIM integration with respect to Manx National Heritage and the new endpoint that we've made. Kind of an Arches API endpoint, yeah, but it's probably better to say it's one of my own. So I don't know if you want that right at the end for those who are interested. Those that aren't can obviously go, but it's up to you.
Okay, well, if you stay on a little while, I'm sure we can facilitate that, and anyone who wants to grab you for that, then yeah, that's doable. Thanks, Reuben. Mahmoud, back to you.
Oh yeah, thank you. Just something about what Philip said. First, can I please get in touch with you and talk about this, because we are building also the SORAI for us, and we want to use what exists there. And the other thing is on this particular issue. At the moment, as far as I understand the system in Arches, if you want to edit the SORAI from the GUI, you have to have special sort of permissions to go into there and to edit it. And it's a bit risky. Like I don't feel very comfortable exposing this to just all the users to be able to go and edit it right away. I feel like there should be some sort of a layer between that and this. And the way that I thought about this is that, can I have some sort of both-way system that goes from Arches to an interface, some visualizer that reads this SORAI, and then once it's edited, it goes back again to Arches. I was wondering if anyone have tried to do something similar before.
So you've come through to the right guy. Currently, there is a proposal on the table to enhance the functionality of the reference data management module of Arches, and to take it to kind of consciously uncouple it from the core Arches module and create an enhanced reference data manager, which will, through APIs and web services, be able to interact with Archers, but also interact with other systems. As part of that functionality, the ability to, and I think it might have, well, it was originally intended to be in core Archers, the ability for a user to look at a thesaurus, and if there wasn't a concept there, to enter it, and then it goes into a candidate pot. So if you have a look in the RDM, there is a candidates folder in the RDM that is intended to hold that, and then an editor like myself would go in and see the candidates and go, oh yes, that's a good term. Here it is. It goes in this part of the hierarchy, and then that would automatically update that record. Now, I've only ever done the back end stuff for Archers. I do the resource models and the RDM stuff. I don't do data entry, so I've never actually tested that, whether or not it works. But that was certainly the intention. And if you import vocabulary, you'll notice, or if you import data, there is a create concepts append function, which will take the vocabulary and anything that's not in a thesaurus, it will pop into a staged pot of concepts. And then again, an editor will come in and go do. So that functionality exists for an import, but what we need to do is make sure that functionality exists for through the graphical user interface, as you mentioned. And that's a conversation that we probably need with Farrell on, because as I say, that was the original intention was that, because that's exactly, we Historic England specified that the entire reference data manager, we sort of said this is what it needs to be able to do, and that was one of the criteria that we said it had to do, was and allow candidate terms to be added by an end user. Because as you say, you don't want anybody going in there, and trust me, I've done it myself. It's very easy to click that little red cross next to a concept and obliterate your knowledge. Very easy to do that, and that's my day job, and I've done it myself. And you slap yourself around the face quite hard when you do that. So yeah, you don't want anyone with access to that, but you do want to not have them phoning you up every 10 minutes saying, can you add a concept? Can you add a concept? Can you add a concept? So if that functionality exists but has not quite been turned on in the background, then we should certainly get that turned on. And that's definitely an issue, a ticket that should be raised against core Archers. I'll do a bit of digging on GitHub and see if I can find anything mentioning it, just to, and then I'll raise it with Farrell or myself. Because I'll be a part of the enhanced RDM project when that kicks off. Yeah, that's a long way off, but that will solve a lot of the problems that anyone's having with the RDM at the moment. And I know Neil's been in discussion with Farrell about this as well. We've been involved, so we have dogs in this fight, and we're certainly looking forward to that enhanced functionality. And we will be, as the domain specialists, we will be helping to drive that as well, along with the Get a Vocabulary program if they come in, if they come on board.
Okay, excellent. So if there aren't any more project updates or questions, I think let's move on quickly. And Stu, do you want to just quickly talk about terms of reference and where we need to go from here? You're muted, Stu. Oh
no, sorry, I clicked it too many times. Yeah, I was just thinking, thanks again for everybody coming along and all the presenters. It's been I think certainly for me, I think it's been one of the best online meetings I've been to in quite a while. So thanks everybody for your contributions. I was just thinking that hopefully we're going to make this an ongoing group, and maybe have 6 monthly meetings. So looking to maybe have another one just after Christmas. But I was thinking that if we're going to try and formalise things, maybe it'd be worth putting together some terms of reference for the group to try and sort of semi-officialize what we're doing, because I know some people, particularly once we actually start meeting, hopefully in person, there can be issues around just turning up and just going off to various meetings without some kind of official reason for it. And if we've got terms of reference, that should help with that. So I'm happy to try and draw something up. Also, just things along the lines of, chair and secretary. I mean, Mac and I volunteered to do this initially, but I don't want to end up like my colleague in the HER forum, who's been the chair for the last 10 years since I ducked out of it because nobody else wants to do it. So I think if we can kind of maybe set a time limit for the chair and secretary, and gives that a chance for other people to get involved. So if people are happy with that, I'll have a look at that. And the one other thing that I was going to mention, if you haven't already joined it, there is obviously the Arches community, the new site forum that launched on the 1st of January. So if you haven't joined that already, please do, and I'll send round a link to that after the meeting.
Excellent. So I'm not still muted, am I? So if we then wait to have a look at the draft that Stuart's going to send round, I think it will be absolutely helpful in justifying face-to-face meetings as and when that comes forward, because I know there will be certainly people in my organisation who look at how we've been over the last 18 months and ask why it can't be online. And I would say that the answer to that is that there are so many questions raised by all of these excellent presentations and all of these project updates that it doesn't enable the sort of networking that we're used to. So I know Stu has suggested that we have these as 6 monthly meetings, and I think that's a really good idea. A couple of meetings a year, I think, is about right. It's not going to overload us. I wonder what the general feeling is about potentially having the next meeting, if the rules allow for it, to be in person and potentially in London, if HE can put us up.
Yeah, I can look into that for London based if we
I mean, how do we all feel about it being London based? I know everything is in London, but I can't help but think, I mean, I'd be very happy to host something in Lincoln, but it's a great deal more difficult, I think, for people to get to Lincoln than it is to London.
I think London's fine, and I think the idea of, I'm going to use that word, blended. I think we're all used to blended meetings, so I suppose those who can't join in person, we have the option for them to join on Teams as well. I think that covers all bases then. Yeah, but okay. For us, London is, but yeah, absolutely fine.
Marvellous. Right, so the next meeting then is we'll have that sometime after Christmas, so perhaps January. Lighten up those horrible bleak weeks after the break. That would be great. So if you can look into a few potential dates for that, Stu, and then come back to us. I'd suggest we all try and get our diaries together now, but no. Right, so I think apart from for me to say thank you to everyone who's been involved in preparing for today, in particular to Stuart, on whose broad shoulders the administration and setup of all of this has fallen, but also just to thank our speakers, Stuart and Chris, for their work on the Greater London HER, Jude and her team as well for letting us know about what's been going on in the Isle of Man and all those fantastic opportunities for bringing in external data. Roger and his team from Jersey. It's been great to see how you've been getting on in the last year, and actually to see, Archers used in a sort of daily data management way. It's been really helpful. And colleagues from EAMENA, in particular Michael and Crystal, that was a fantastic presentation, and the sheer geographical scope of the work you're doing, and then bringing in the work that Junaid and Mahmoud are doing. It's almost going to be from ocean to ocean, an unbroken line of Archers projects, bringing together data in an almost standard way. I think that's fantastic. So thank you all so much. It's been really, really helpful for me personally. I mean, I've found the last year and a half to be something of a slog, meetings like this really do kind of re-inspire my my interest in this aspect of my job. So thank you all for that. I'm going to maybe suggest now that Reuben, if you want to stay on and answer those specific questions that you raised or offered to answer, that'd be great. But otherwise, I think we can draw this to a close.
Thanks, Alastair.
Thank you.
Brilliant.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Stuart.
Thanks, man.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Al.
Cheers. Thanks. Bye.
Right, so I wanted to run through a slightly more technical deep dive on what Jude was demoing earlier, surrounding the integration between the CIIM and arches. Yeah, so it's essentially an integration between our software, the CIIM, and arches. So what we've built is something quite analogous to related resources that we call linked records. And that is, yes, essentially pulling related resources, but from an external source. So in Jude's case, that source is MAEASaM and MAEASXG, and that's the source of truth for the linked records. So agents, archives, objects and publications, I believe, while arches is the source of truth for the monuments and the sites, etc. And yes, we've done this using our software, the CIIM, which is essentially a middleware solution to synchronize between back office systems, and in this case, arches, which is obviously a public facing application. So yeah, the CIIM is populated directly from MAEASaM, so it picks up all the updates and any new records, deletions, etc. And it pushes all of those records to an Elasticsearch, which we've put on the Arches server, that the custom code we've written queries directly on the fly. And in this case, it does that depending on which dot you click on the map, so which map pop-up you bring up. And essentially, it takes this UUID and it queries the data in the Elasticsearch for those linked records that have this UUID attached, and in this case, the 16. We can click on that linked resources like Jude showed, and we come to the results screen. Pretty simple front end, but it's following the Arches style. It's got the sort filters, sort fields, and some pagination. And then clicking on one will obviously bring up the results based upon data points that Jude wanted for each of the different types. That's essentially the one way. So that's kind of how MAEASaM gets updated. So the CIIM gets updated from MAEASaM, but we also have to figure out the other way, which how the CIIM picks up updates in Arches, which was a bit more difficult. And to do that, I had to load up just an Arches instance on my local machine. As that's the only place I currently access it. I need to be on the Wales VPN to access the actual implementation. But these are all the pubs in London, obviously.
Yay.
And we've created a endpoint that picks up any changes to the records, so that's deletions, edits, or creations, based upon a date range. So you can see, can you all see that? Or I guess I can't really zoom in on the URL. Yeah. I guess I can make it bigger. I guess I'm printing out the metadata here anyway, but from date and time, a to date and time, and then some sort field, sort ID, sort order, and then some pagination stuff. But essentially what this is doing is looking at a table in the Arches database and bringing back all the records that have been updated within that range. Cool. So yeah, here the 1st of January or the 1st of June. and it spits them out in native Archie's JSON. I don't think there's going to be any on this screen, but there's also a flag for deleted records, which is quite cool. And the
where'd you get this data set from, Reuben?
you can just Google it. I can send it you if you want.
Yeah, please do. Yeah,
it's fun, isn't it? You probably might know some.
We're
I think Phil speaks to everyone.
Yeah.
There is a Google map of all the pubs that the Archers project team have drunk in.
Right.
That is still ongoing, being built. Yeah. So this would be quite
more
handy.
records than this.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. I think I covered everything there. Kind of lost my trail of thought. Oh, and then and then the sim will ingest this and update its sub records. So we have that kind of dual path of updates either in MIMSI or updates in Archers. I feel like I've just rambled on. Neil, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I mean I think what we've done is good. I think it will work well for ongoing, incremental updates. At the moment, it's a little bit slow in terms of the initial population. So particularly on the Royal Commission, where that table that you're looking at has 5 million rows, I think.
Yes, well, yeah, it can go.
Yeah. I think we may want to talk to Farallon about whether it's possible to clear down that table every now and again, or maybe that's just an artifact of their test system where they've imported data so many times, and for test purposes, there are more rows in that table than there would be in a normal system. So it's still got a few teething problems. I wouldn't push this as being a complete solution yet, but it's certainly almost there. We're just refining it now.
I mean, something from our point of view, from an end user perspective, I mentioned it during the talk, what I'd really like is on the list of results on the left for the linked resources to also appear there as a clickable option. At the moment, you kind of can only get to them by clicking the point on the map, and then you see the linked resources. So it's a little hidden. So that's just from a user point of view. And the way we've got around that is by doing the video tutorial to highlight it to people. But but all these things you're always looking to finesse, to add, to improve. So but just getting the sim, talking to artists in real time is great. That's set us on the journey now.
How difficult would it be to do that, to implement that change?
Probably, well, it's not too difficult, no, but it takes it from the one query we have here to however many queries you have in the search results, I guess.
Right. Yeah.
If you imagine you can have 25 down here, so we'll have to run all 25, but
and then when you go to the page and run another 25.
Yeah. But it's where we can just make that more visible. So also when you click to view the full report, what would be great if it was also a link, there was a linked records or linked resources link there as well. It's just that improving the visibility all the time, but that's on the future map. But yeah, it's balancing that against not wanting to slow down performance.
So do those linked resources appear on the report as well, Jude? Is that,
no. They don't, do they, Reuben?
No, they don't.
No. So that's something but sometimes you can have linked resources. We can have over 1,000 people linked to a resource because they're every single person commemorated on a war memorial. So we've got to first base, and now it's like, okay, how do we continue doing that? So
so that's an obvious limitation. If you want 1,000, 1,000 links on the bottom of a report, then
or it could be 1,000 artifacts.
Or I guess it could just be this link, couldn't it?
It could just be that link, actually. Yes. Yeah.
Makes more sense.
That's a really good point. Yeah.
So yeah, that would take some thought, I think, just to make sure that this gets triggered in those places. Because at this point, the only time the query gets triggered is when you click on the map pop-up.
Yeah.
I think that's probably the only complicated bit of it, but it does sound like work for the future.
Yeah. Well, you know, we'll get there. That's the next bit. That's the next bit.
Right. Well, are we all done then? Do we think?
Thanks, Reuben.
Well, we are, but just to say, while we're all here, and it might be of interest. So, as part of Keystone, we're developing a place model, so that places stop being hierarchical word lists or whatever, and become actual instances of a resource model themselves, which for some use cases we think is very useful. Obviously not for addresses, because in London we don't want 10 million instances of a place model for the addresses, but things like admin area, for example, it makes sense to have it as an actual, you know, a geometry itself. But, and it's quite a big but, Elasticsearch has an issue in that it will not import anything that is bigger than 1500 coordinate pairs. So your admin area or your boundaries have to be simplified, which I think is not that much of an issue. But just to let you know, but yeah, so we're still in the is this a good idea stage. We think it is. We think it makes sense, in the same way that periods are now in Archer's in Keystone. Periods are instances of a resource model as well, as opposed to a drop down, which again makes more sense because you can, if you so wish, add a geometry. For the UK, it's a bit, you know, for England, it's a bit daft really, because obviously every period's geometry is pretty much the map of England. You know, so Roman England is the map of England, and Iron Age England is the map of England. But yeah, you know, at a global scale, that would be quite handy, because the Iron Age in the UK is different to the Iron Age in France, is different to the Iron Age in Norway, for example. But yeah, so you can at least add a bit more information. It still looks like a drop down when you select it, but it's a resource instance link rather than just a concept in the RDM. What we need to be able to do is drag information from that resource instance, though, into the record itself that you're editing. So if you add Iron Age, and what we want to be able to do is auto-populate the from and to date with the basic Iron Age dates, which you can then overwrite if you've got a more precise date range. You know, you've got an actual radiocarbon date, for example, that dates it specifically. So yeah, we're not quite there yet, I don't think. But they're the two developments that we're currently working on that will be of interest to all of you, I suppose, is whether or not you go down the implementation of implementing place as instances of the place model, and periods as instances of the period model, rather than just drop downs.
Does that raise the question, though, of how deep does the rabbit hole go?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, for periods, it's not a problem.
That sounds reasonable.
You know, periods, it's fine. And as I say, for some instances of place, it makes a lot of sense as well. We would be looking probably, if we were to go UK wide, well, England wide, with one of our instances of Archers, the county district parish list is clockering huge, to be honest. You know, I think that's at least 10,000. There's at least 10,000 parishes, I would say. Which, okay, do we go down that route? And also, the big question is, shouldn't GIS be doing this anyway? So the ability to, I mean, I know that we've worked on, we've got the ESRI sort of thing, and that chap who was Mike was talking about QGIS as well. Because what you really ideally want is you want to put your point on the map, and then Archers to suck in all that richness from ESRI or QGIS or whatever, and say, okay, well, this point is in this ward, it's in this county, it's in this district, it's in this parish, for example, and then auto-populate your record with that, rather than having to create separate records entirely. But yeah, I just thought as I say, it's something that we think conceptually should be done, but it's implementing it in a sensible way that we may be struggling with at the moment. But yeah, just a heads up really, because as you say, it's fucking rabbit hole, Rube.
Right. Well, so does that cover everything then?
As far as I'm concerned, yeah.
Good. I'm vanished. All right, team. Well, I'm off then. Thanks very much. It's been really great to see you all.
Thanks everybody.
And thank you, Stuart, for doing everything.
Thanks, Stuart. Really enjoyed it. Thanks for being with us as well.
Thank you.
Bye.
Cheers all.
Bye.
Bye.